Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to my submission for Summer Games Done Quick 2018. It's the Bouncer, new game, Co%. I know I've got a little bit of shine here because I've got my window open today. It's a PlayStation 2 game that we're going to be running on the PlayStation 3 just for the sake of cutting down on about 1.5 to 2 minutes of load times. It's a launch game, as you can see here, published by Square. It's the Square game that probably a lot of people don't remember, although when you see some of the gameplay, it might jog your memory. Because this is a game that a lot of people rented, but I think few people bought. Now we're in the main menu here, and we're going to start the run from here, although it's a little bit tricky, because the in-game timer is already running. I'll explain that coming up in just a little bit, but 3, 2, 1, go. And the first thing we're going to want to do here is say no to cutscenes, and we're going to be saying no to a lot of them. There are about 1 hour and 15 minutes of cutscenes throughout the course of this game. Going into every battle, you get a cutscene. Coming out of every battle, you get a cutscene. Oh, we got stuck on the chair there. That's not very good stuff. And then there's all of the cutscenes that set up the plot. I will do my best to keep you guys informed on the plot as we go, because it's a pretty interesting one. I think that there's a lot of good stuff to this game that you're not going to get to see because basically we're speedrunning. And of course, like I said, we got to give you the cliff notes on about 1.5 hours worth of plot here. It's kind of like, I liken this game to people who stop by my stream and see me running it. I liken it to watching a Rush Hour movie, but not getting any of the back and forth between Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker, not getting anything but the fight scenes. If you do that, the Rush Hour movie is going to be a lot quicker, but you're going to miss out on a lot of the plot and fun stuff associated with it. Now, this first fight is an interesting one because it's the only one in the game, that I know of anyway, where you can lose and continue on with the playthrough. That's because you're these 3 bouncers, Ko, who we're playing as, Volt, who has a jacket with a no cactar sign on it, and Sion, who I may end up accidentally calling Sora a number of times throughout the course of this run. And you guys work at this bar called Fate on Dog Street in the city of Edge. And these guys broke into your bar, so you're going to get rid of them. But this is the only time we're actually going to be fighting in a bar throughout the course of this speedrun. Now, what happens in these cutscenes that you're not going to see here is that Dominique, who is she's a girl who hangs out at the bar. She's sort of like the mascot for the bar. You know, she brings customers in. And she's going to get kidnapped. Well, they're all kind of sworn to protect her because she's a member of, the bar family. So they're going to go try and get her back. And that's going to be the extent of our adventure. Now we're out here, and you may notice you can see the enemy health as well as the number of enemies remaining by checking the upper right-hand part of the screen. This part's pretty interesting because you'll see we're in a little bit of an alternate universe where we're fighting MSF, which is Mikado Special Forces, not Medicine Sans Frontier, the organization that hopefully will raise a ton of money for with this marathon and with this run. But it's funny because this is kind of a bizarro universe. You end up fighting MSF, there's a solar company that's trying to take over the world. It's a whole lot of things that don't really fit in with the normal set of things. This is a beat 'em up. You can see how ambitious this game wanted to be because, believe it or not, this map is very extensive. You can run up those stairs, and there's a whole area which, for a 3-on-5 fight, is sort of incredible. Here's the XP screen. We're going to buy the circular uppercut here, and that's the only time we're going to do anything besides leveling up our power and then maybe our health and our defense for marathon safety. In a regular speed run, chances are you would just max out power, and that would probably be it. As you see here, we skip a cutscene, pick our character, and then because we're picking Ko, who's kind of the smart aleck, usually he'll try and say a witty one-liner or something and get into the fight. Here we're utilizing circular uppercut, which makes a lot of these battles pretty easy because it's one of the few moves in the game where you can actually juggle enemies. And you juggle them pretty easily. We got a little bit of a chain there, although it didn't want to seem to formally give us the XP for it. But you get through these parts pretty easy. You're fighting to a train, and you're going to get on a train full of rocket fuel, but these security guards don't want to let you by. So you got to kind of take them out. This is the part that in runs with some of the other characters, Volt especially, this part can be very vital to your run because you can chain XP pretty easily. The chaining is a little bit harder to do with Ko because his attacks are all very close to his body. He does the circular uppercut there, but even that doesn't have a lot of knockback. And knockback is important because of the ragdoll physics. As you see there, when we hit a guy up into the air, he kind of flies around a little bit, and he can fly into his other enemies and knock them down. If he does knock them down, then they take half the damage that he took from the attack that knocked him into the air. And the collision detection in this game is not the best, so basically you get two enemies that, especially up at the top of this train car, they can knock into each other a few times, take a ridiculous amount of damage, and make these fights go pretty quickly. But again, because Ko doesn't have a very effective knockback move, you can't take as much advantage of that with him as you can with some of the other characters, so his run is one of the slower ones. And that part's a little bit unfortunate. So you have 8 attacks, essentially. And some of them combo in different ways, and it's pretty natural to combat, but especially playing on a PS3, it's a little tough, because you have your high, medium, and low attacks, and then a jump attack with all of the face buttons. There is also a pressure sensitivity on it as well, so you have heavy and light of each of your attacks, which is really cool. Unfortunately for us, that tends to be a very sensitive reader, and we want to use the light, heavy punch up until we get the circular uppercut. Okay, there we got an XP chain. I can go ahead and explain that to you now. If you kill enemies in rapid succession, kind of like that there, you get a chain, and those are exponential, times 2, 4, 8, and I don't think there's a 16, I think it caps at 8. But the reason that's important is because killing that enemy and getting the chain, we get 40 XP or battle points in this game instead of 20. And in a game where that can mean an extra upgrade at the end of the run, a little bit of more survivability for you, those can be pretty helpful. Also, sometimes it means you can get power upgrades and different things earlier than you would if you were just getting the standard XP for some enemies. Because the cool thing about experience chaining is it also applies to bosses. So for example, if we landed the last hit on that security guard around the same time that we got the last hit on Echidna, we would get 150 times 2 experience for that fight, which, 150 doesn't seem like a lot. Actually, it's 300, but that can be an entire upgrade that you get here that maybe you don't get a little bit later in the run. Back to the storyline. We hitched a ride on top of the train car full of rocket fuel, and a helicopter piloted by one of Ko's friends shot out the brakes on the train. So there is now rocket fuel heading without brakes toward a station. Well, if only we could detach those train cars that happen to be carrying all the rocket fuel. That's what this means. It's one of the few places where you can't skip these cutscenes. You just have to wait for him to aimlessly open the box. It's always going to be in the third one you open, and then you can skip the cutscene. And the reason detaching the rocket fuel is important is because of this part where we're coming up in a little bit, and actually, whoever the host is, if you want to get ready to read some of the donations, this is a great part for donation reading, because we're just going to be running down a lot of long hallways. In those loading screens, you learn a little bit more about your characters, their backstory. Ko's from a prestigious family, but he enjoys Taekwondo, and apparently that means that he cannot be allowed in his family, so he ends up getting exiled, which is the gist of his storyline there. You also learn how he meets up with Leanne. We'll talk about that. But like I said, this is a great part for donations. The reason for that is because you just run down these hallways. This is one of 2 parts in the course of this run where you don't have to fight any of the enemies. There's some unique win conditions in a bunch of different places. This one, you just get to the end of the hallway. The boss fights, if you kill the boss, the fight ends. And then there are some where you have to defeat all the enemies, but there's only a couple more of those in the rest of this run, because this game relies a lot on boss fights, and fighting a lot of bosses multiple times. The reason I think that is because this was a hugely ambitious game. They wanted it to be an interactive movie, as I mentioned earlier with the Rush Hour comparison. They wanted cutscenes that you could move in and fight in and do different things in. Unfortunately, that ended up not being the case. This needed to be a launch game, and they just ran out of time, so they kind of went with what they had. I think that's part of the reason that you'll see we fight all of the bosses multiple times, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, because they do get some cool power upgrades throughout. And I'm not knocking the game at all, because despite the fact that it was a launch game, it has a lot of really cool features in it. Once you get through the game and you've seen the basic story once, you might think that you know everything that happened, but that's not necessarily the case. Because they built in a lot of alternate pathways for this game that make it really exciting and fun to play. We actually just got through one of the parts of that alternate pathing, and we saw the good side of it, because we found the key card that detached the train, yada yada yada. If you don't detach the train car, then there are little like gates that will come down on you, and if you don't move fast enough through that part, you end up dying, and it's basically just a game over because you got trapped in the fire from nuclear fuel. Oh, if we'd have gotten that uppercut there, that would have been a ×4. That would have been really nice. Alright, so we are still on our quest to find Dominique. We think we know where she's holed up, but we needed a magical flying car to get there.
It's a tough job.
And there you get a little bit of a witty one-liner from Ko. And I mentioned earlier that as you look at Sion, you might recognize Sora. Well, the reason for that is because a guy named Tetsuya Nomura, who I'm sure some of you know far better than I do, he worked on the characters for Kingdom Hearts. He also did the character designs for this game. And that included the character design for Sion, which, again, you'll see he bears a lot of resemblance to Sora, or at least that's what I think. It's kind of funny because you've got a guy who's advertising for Square with the no cat cards at it. You've got a quintessentially early 2000s guy, you know, we've got the vest, we've got the hats and cargo pants. And then you've got a guy who's basically an early character design for Sora, which is pretty cool. I'm going to find the dogs here, not because of any maliciousness, but just because of the fact that we have to rely on our teammates for a lot of combat, and they don't fight those dogs. The reason for that is I think because the AI, the friendly AI anyway, just seems to notice enemies there. It doesn't really recognize that they are enemies with a limited hitbox. So they'll try and high punch those dogs, they'll try and do a bunch of different things to them that they can't do, and it makes those fights drag out forever. So we try and go for them first, and if we can take out any of the Mikado Special Forces, I won't abbreviate it to MSF, but if we can take out any of the Mikado Special Forces along the way, so much better. Now we're at the second boss, and he's a guy that you're going to see 3 times. His name is Mugetsu. A little bit difficult to find because this room is a little bit dark, but that's him. You can tell because he's got the white hair hanging out the back. Now he's one of my favorite bosses because he's got some of the coolest cutscenes that you'll ever, well, skip for purposes of speedrun. But also, he has the weakest gravity of any of the bosses. And what I mean by that is he's very easily juggled 5 to 6 times. Now, we didn't get the kill there, so we're going to be a little bit behind on the XP route, and that's a bummer. Probably should have taken a safety save there, but I think we'll be okay because this fight is not super duper difficult. I know if the run gets in, I will absolutely safety save there. But what you saw there, I mentioned we're behind now on our experience routing. Your teammates can kill enemies for you. In fact, we rely on it in a couple places. The problem is, if they land the killing blow on an enemy, you don't get experience for it, and that applies to bosses as well. So we lost out on 150 experience, which is a pretty hefty amount in this game, all because our teammates decided to actually come through for us. But unfortunately, as you see there, we got a really good chain on Doragon, who is voiced by the same actor who does the voice of Legato in the English dub of Trigun. We got a pretty good fight on him, juggled him for a while there, and we get to one of the funnest parts of the run, where we skip not 3, not 4, not 5, maybe 6? No, 7. We skip 7 cutscenes in a row, pick our character, and get a loading screen. Now, you can tell this is a Square game by a few different things it does, and one of them is that we're at the part now where our party has gotten separated from one another, and we have to keep fighting through this factory that we just broke into, and hopefully we find our buddies along the way. It's not really guaranteed, but maybe we do. And we've got a if you remember the character Locke from Final Fantasy VI, this part kind of reminds me of one of his parts, because now we're going undercover in the Mikado Corporation, and we're going to try and pass ourselves off as one of the crew here. Oops, we messed up. You might be wondering why I did that. That's because doing the symbols is really fun, and we kind of do it every now and then on screen, and I thought about having it as maybe a donation incentive, but it is very slow relative to just fighting these. These are 3 standard enemies. We've upgraded our attacks enough by this point that we can take them out really good. Especially when we get a little bit of ragdoll action there, get that speed chain. Now this part is strange. These next 2 rooms are all RNG, and it can eat up a little bit of time if you don't get it. This first guy, he kind of wants to mess with you a little bit. And he'll give you one of the symbols, either this, 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 or this. He gave us the one up top. And then we give him the square symbol. And for whatever reason, he decides to let us go. That part is all RNG. Normally, he will attack you, which is what we want, because we don't have to see this cutscene. One of the few unskippable cutscenes in the game, but it does demonstrate some of the ways that this run can take a little bit more time. I also don't understand the choice of outfit for Mikado Special Forces. Alright, that guy, he comes up to us with the fighting stance, and we give him the await further instructions that he doesn't appreciate. But there are his instructions, basically. Get circular uppercut juggled until you are no more. The reason that you want them to come after you in that first part, in addition to time save, is it's a bottleneck. And it is a great bottleneck for us because of the ragdoll physics. We can uppercut one of these guys into the other one, and they will just go one right into another and do a ton of damage to each other. But, I mean, this is just as easy as circular uppercut you later for free. This part I have not been able to figure out in terms of what the fastest way to get through here is. Because we're going to come up on this guy, and he's a Mikado Special Forces elite. So we have to give him the gesture first. And I always give him this one, because that's one of the positive ones. Sometimes he'll let you through. Ko will be like, oh, working hard. And then other times, like this one, he catches us. Again, this is probably good for a submission or a speed run, just because it's an extra fight we're going to have to do, and it demonstrates how, you know, some things can take a little bit longer. Ko is kind of the smart aleck of the group, by the way. We've got to fight the vacuum cleaner here. Ko's lucky, he only has to fight one of the vacuums. The other guys have to fight more. By the way, this is part of the branching pathways that I talked about earlier. Depending on who you pick here, you get a completely different part. If you pick it as Sion, you end up fighting a woman who turns into a panther, which we'll learn more about her backstory coming up in a bit. Got a fortunate little bobble there, so that's good. Also got enough XP to obtain E rank. And the branching paths are where I think a lot of the magic of this game takes place. There's tons of storyline and little lore, different things that you don't get to see if you don't play through all of the, with all of the characters. And even, in fact, unless you look up a walkthrough that can tell you some of the ways to unlock some of the hidden characters. Because, for example, one of them is play through the entire game with Sion, except for the last fight, switch to Volt, which is also very weird because you spent the entire game upgrading Sion, and now you're going to play as Volt, which makes it a little bit harder. We're fighting Mugetsu again here, and I mentioned he's got that favorable gravity, which I'm not going to complain about. The goal is to just find a way to attack him. That was a really good fight there. That is one place where you can die pretty easily, and fortunately he wanted to cooperate. The reason you can die pretty easily is because of the ragdoll physics I mentioned earlier. Unfortunately, they apply to you as well. And that means that when you're in a room surrounded by enemies like we are there, if one of your teammates gets taken down, you go down too. And that can be a pretty big problem because you take a lot of damage and then the enemies can just sort of swarm you. Another difficult part is the fact that enemies can essentially pick a direction to block in when they get up. So like when you're fighting that boss there, if he blocks you, he can then punish your attack pretty quickly. Ko's the fastest attacking character, so it's harder for them to punish, say, when compared to Volt. And plus, I think Ko's the funniest character, that's why I picked him. We're at another part that is a trope for most video games. That is the escort mission. In all my times of running this game, I have not had Dominique die ever. Part of the reason for that is because the enemies don't specifically try to attack her. Well, one, she has really good defense and can take a bunch of hits. And two, the enemies never try to specifically attack her. So if you just run far enough ahead of her, she doesn't end up taking any residual attacks, which is nice. This part is one of the criticisms people have about the game. The camera angle's really bad. And if you don't know where to go, like if you don't know you're supposed to run at the camera there, then you end up going off on a side path, wasting time and fighting a couple of those robots. This is another great part for donations, just because you don't have to fight any of the enemies. You punch that one security guard to make it go quicker, but you don't have to fight any of the enemies. A lot of people, when they played this game casually, chances are they rented it, because this game only sold a couple 100,000 copies worldwide. When you played this game, this is where you probably got most frustrated, because most people think you have to fight all of the giant orange robots and the Mr. Grabby Hands, as I call them, because of one of the attacks they have. You don't. You just run past them and run to the staircase. The orange robots, especially on your first playthrough, hit very hard. And for this entire escort mission, as you see with Dominique, and even with us, your health sticks around. So if you take a lot of damage on the first floor, and you're trying to fight all the robots, you're kind of in some big trouble. Alright, we're going to continue here. Honestly, that could be a safety save for purposes of a speed run. I mean, again, safety saves only take a couple of seconds, so there's no reason to not save at every possible spot. And the bosses in this game, including this guy, PD4, have a ton of offense. And because we don't take health upgrades in the run, that can be very bad, because they can kill us fairly easily. Fortunately, you know, he has pretty favorable gravity for our intents and purposes, so he gets really easily juggled by Ko's uppercut here. Oh, he got us with the whip. He's got a few attacks. One includes using his arm as a giant metal whip, and it does a lot of damage. He has another move that's like 8 kicks. A little bit of Rockettes action there. But we'll save here. And as you see there, playtime in the upper corner, it says playtime 16 minutes, even though we're at 21 minutes. The reason for that is because that play timer functions as more of a session timer. So as soon as you hit start in the game, that clock is running. And it skips loading screens. So you see we've had about 5 minutes of loading and different kinds of things, which is kind of nice for our purposes as speedrunners. We use for this game, we use a combination of the in-game timer and real time, because the in-game timer isn't perfect. As you saw there, it was minutes, which is a bummer, because the top 2 times in this run, well, especially for Ko, I have the world record, but the top time is within a minute of each other. So it doesn't do us much good to know that we're both at, well, for Ko it's 19 and 20 minutes. I got 19 not too long ago. But for all the other characters, the record is tied because it's all within 1 minute of each other. So that doesn't do us a whole lot of good for purposes of speedrunning. And we're at a point now where for safety, we're going to start taking some life upgrades and different upgrades there, which is helpful. So we use a combination of the two, but because I run on the PlayStation 3 and the other guys run on PlayStation 2, real timer is a little bit not fair either, because I have the world record there by a lot. It just kind of helps balance things out. But like I mentioned, the play timer, in addition to measuring to the minute, also has the unfortunate circumstances of measuring like time you're in menus and different things. This fight can be difficult. We've got a pretty good pattern on her now. Basically, those giant robots, those robots especially, are the elite robots, and can hurt you very badly if they decide to. So you want to isolate Echidna like we did there. And we're going to take another health upgrade. We'll save, because we're now at the boss rush part of the run. I know, the run's flying by. But those robots, if they decide to hit you, they can take about half your health, and then Echidna can combo you when you're on the ground, and then you die pretty quickly. It's been a while since we've gotten a story upgrade. You find out throughout the course of this run that Dominique, who you're trying to track down, is Mikado, the big final boss's sister. And he sort of turned against the human race because they didn't help her and let her die. And he's trying to use this company to like find a way to keep his sister alive or like permanently around. And so now they're going up to space to try and fight the final boss. This is the part that can end your run. We're going to pick Sion, even though the goal of the run is to always pick Ko. Here's the reason for that.
Any way you look at
you have to pick a character there to fly your hovercraft. And you don't want to pick the person that you're beating the game with. just one of the kind of arbitrary rules we picked out. And basically, you go back to your last save point. If you do that, that's the rule. Well, in a speed run, you don't save. So if you pick the wrong character there, it's run over. And this is the hardest boss in the game. We've got a really good pattern there. Hardest boss in the game for a couple of reasons. The first one is that he has a ton of moves that do a ridiculous amount of damage. He's super duper strong. And he also has some moves that can't be blocked. Or if, well, no, because he has a spinning move where if you get sucked into it, it does a ridiculous amount of damage to you. You knock him off of your hovercraft at the same time that you turn on the afterburners, and he gets toasted. So he's gone, and Echidna's done for. And now we're in outer space for the big final showdown. Or are we? Well, we're not quite yet. Remember that panther that we fought earlier? Well, we need to get her backstory. And she decided to turn into a human. It's a panther that can turn into a person, and it turns out she is also Sion's love interest. Sion thought she died 2 years ago. It turns out she was taken by Mikado and essentially experimented on, for lack of a better term, which included giving her that thing that turns her into a panther at the expense of, whoops, aging her 2 years. Or 10 years, excuse me. So she doesn't look anything like Sion realized. But this run is going very well so far. We're behind the world record, as you can see. And then she mutters, Sion, he realizes what they've done. And now he's got additional renewed purpose to fight the final boss, which is what we're going to do now. So we'll pick Ko. Little bit of a spoiler here. This is going to be a two-part fight, so we want to maintain as much health as we can throughout this fight. And again, he's giving us a very favorable pattern so far. Typically, you want to try and bait him into attacking your teammates so that he doesn't just blindly block your uppercuts. That went about as well as that's going to go. So we'll take that. Defense up. We didn't take any damage, which is great.
That was pretty.
Because now, he's fighting us in his ultimate power form. That is, in overalls. And unfortunately, when he does some of those lower attacks and stuff, he can still get damage in on you, which is a bummer. Alright, Bolt helped us out there a little bit. As you can see, they can kind of teleport, block, and change directions if they want to block sort of on a whim. And he is only going for low attacks on us, which is a bit of an unconventional pattern. That's pretty hard there. He's not letting us punish at all. We're just gonna hang on here because we're doing pretty well on time, so we can afford to be a little bit safe. We're gonna run away, like most good fighters do. Know when to strategically run away, and then we bop him. This is where the game ends for both Sion and Volt, but the timer doesn't end for us. Here's why. Well, he drops to one knee. He's one of two bosses that die in this game. The other bosses don't. At least I don't think Echidna does. I'm not entirely sure what happens to her. But in Echidna's playthrough, or Chaldea doesn't. I'm not sure what happens to her. In Echidna's playthrough, wow, we're all over the place. In Volt's playthrough, Echidna comes to work at the bar. And you get this nice little ending cutscene here, which seems like it would be the end of the game, but when you beat it with Ko, he gets a ring on his cell phone that he needs to come find Leanne. Leanne has been pretty much a part of the storyline throughout. She's the one who flew the plane and shot the train engines not that long ago. And I don't know what is up with her physics, but if we land an uppercut here, she just kind of flies all over the place. I don't really know what the purpose of that is. But we get that uppercut chain on her pretty quickly, and just like that, the run is over. We don't need any more uppercuts here. We can save the game, even though we beat the epilogue. And as you see, it took us 28 minutes, but our actual playtime is 21. I just flipped over to 22 there. 21 is actually only a minute off world record pace. So we almost tied the record. We get this little cutscene here.
They don't have much faith in me, do they?
We can kind of watch this cutscene. But yeah, this is a really great game for a number of reasons. I think a lot of people look at it and they see some of the things that it didn't do.
So,
It didn't
what's
have
gonna happen
breakable
now?
environments. It didn't have
You
interactive
passed.
cutscenes
You'll
to the
continue with your
extent that it
current
was
assignment.
supposed to. So it didn't live up to all the hype for being
See
a
you later.
PS2 launch game. But
Hey,
still,
yo, wait
the
a minute.
storyline in it's
I haven't seen
incredibly
you in a long
deep.
time and
Like I said,
all,
it's
so,
got about an hour
why
and a
don't
half
we-
worth of
I
cutscenes.
thought I told
And it
you
is a
it's
very
against
cool
regulations
story,
to get
especially if you
personally
try and get
involved
all the
with your
different bits of
assignment.
lore and things. So I think it's a great speedrun. I'm hoping that more people will take the
It's a
game
tough
up
job.
because I want to see more people play this game. I want to see more people find different ways to break this game. I mean, there's 20 moves, and we've got it down to only one that we actually use. It's got a really cool combat system. They went all out getting voice designers. This is Shanice Wilson here singing "Love Is a Gift," which is kind of a thing in, I guess, a meme in my speedruns that listen to this after a record-setting run. But yeah, I'm hoping that this gets into Summer Games Done Quick because I really want to see people pick up this game. It's a great game, really, like I said, underrated, even though some people think of it as being a little bit more silly. And we beat it there conservatively in 28-20. Now, I'm going to bake some time into my estimate for possibly dying, because you're almost always going to die once, except for in some good speed runs. So we'll keep that 28-20. I'm going to submit it with a little bit more generous estimate than that. Thank you very much for watching this. I'm hoping for the best. I know I tried to cram a lot into a short period of time here. This is my first time submitting a run, so we'll see how it goes. Thank you all very much for your time. I appreciate it. One last skippable cutscene there. We'll click End Game, and hopefully I'm going to see you guys at SGDQ. Take it easy, everybody.